Hi, I'm Anna Olsen here on Insights into Consciousness here on A1R Radio. I am going to do basically a show on the Fool tarot card. And the reason why is because I was meditating on what to do the show on today, and that's what came up. So there's always a reason, and I just go with what I get. So today I'm going to focus on the Fool. And I do notice that the Fool is one of the most diverse cards, meaning it can mean so many different things during a reading. And I look at the picture and I meditate on it a little bit during the reading to see what it is that it means for that specific person in their specific situation. So usually the Fool will mean that somebody that the loved one, maybe they know a loved one is being careless, or it could be that the person getting the reading is either being careless, or it could be that they need to be more carefree. And this is where I like to explain that everything has a balance, and we can go to one extreme or the other. Somebody, who eats too many French fries, there's going to be an issue. If you eat a few, every once in a while, you're okay. There has to be a balance. And we can see with almost everything in life that if we are, as human beings, going too far one way, we're going to have some consequences that may not make us feel very comfortable. And if we are, kind of going the opposite way too far as well, again, we're not going to be as comfortable. We could even lose our life from things like this. Think about an eating disorder. That's one way too far in one direction, where somebody could literally lose their life from not eating enough. But if you eat too much, or you eat the wrong things, too much of the wrong things, then you could end up losing your life in the other direction. And both can surprisingly take about the same amount of time. So we have to go somewhere in the middle. And this goes for everything in our lives. There's this scale that we need to manage. And it's in everybody's life. It's in everybody's existence. And I think this is part of gaining to this amazing control that we can over our bodies, our thoughts, our brains, and everybody else that we have in our lives, including, if there's toxic people in our lives, if there are people who are loving in our lives, are we making enough time for the people that are loving and who we are here to serve and love? And are we making the least amount of time putting up those good boundaries with those people who are toxic or who want to take from us? So that's basically what I feel that the Fool is a good representation for. And of course, we also have some other cards in the deck, the tarot deck, such as the Justice card. It has scales right there on it. And that goes for the justice, maybe karma, maybe, things that people need to balance out in the way of good deeds and things like that. Or if they're going into a court issue, then, we have the Justice scale. But I think the Fool is a good representation of how we can be reminded that there is a balance in all things, and it can go either way. So I have 3 decks, and I took the Fool card out of each of these decks. The first one is a deck from Switzerland. It's a basic tarot, and it's kind of rare. I got these from somebody. Somebody gave them to me, and I was given to them by somebody that got them from somebody that collects them. And I got some really, really nice ones. There's this one from Switzerland, and I'm not exactly sure how to read, the language, but this is the first one that depicts the Fool. And then we have the Cosmic Tarot, where we have the Fool kind of bouncing on the top of a mini mountain, I guess you could say, with the big mountains in the back. There's a lot of representation, symbolism in this one. There's the Fool. And then lastly, on my Italian art, my Baccelli deck, I have the Fool here. And, there's typically a dog involved in the Fool card. This one has a bunch of different languages. I absolutely love this one. This is my go-to. And these are good for men, too, because they're not all fluffy and, little flowers everywhere. There's a lot of gold that has to do with money and income on these, too. So, usually there's somebody balancing on a mountain or a cliff. It's usually a young man. It depicts a young man who's a bit naive and not as experienced in the world. and then you have, the cliff right beside them. They don't seem to see the cliff. They don't seem to understand that, that there's a cliff right beside them. And they're being a little careless, and they're being very naive. So it's funny how most of them are walking on the side of a cliff with mountains in the background or in the distance, which is representation of big obstacles to overcome in the future. This is more of a youth card. For the most part, when you do, like, let's say classes or something on this card, and tarot or reading cards, it's depicting somebody who's a little more naive, doesn't have a lot of life experience, is still learning. Usually depicts a male, because females can generally mature a little bit faster. And then we have the dog, which can mean a whole lot of different things. But one of the things that it means is that the dog tends to be, companionship, man's best friend. And it's a sign of boyhood, or childhood, where the person is kind of their inner child, and they're going back to their more or less careless nature, where they are not really thinking a whole lot about the future. They're thinking more about the now and being playful and, oh, what can I find and what can I do in the present moment. It's less about, it's not as much about a planning card. It's more of an in the moment card. So let's just think about the alternative meaning to this card. If one meaning could be that you are careless and you're kind of walking on the side of a cliff and not seeing the cliff, when it's upside down, inverted, or even when it's not, and you look at it and you're feeling that maybe that person is too uptight, maybe they need to let loose a little bit more, maybe they need to be more playful and in the moment, and not think about planning every single thing. You think about these people who manage money very well, and yeah, maybe they could be called a cheapskate or whatever, but when you think about it, yes, there's a great balance in budgeting, but some people go so far as to do strange things to save just a tiny bit of money, to where they're not even enjoying their life anymore. So there we go again with the balance. And this is just a very small example of the larger scale representation of these cards. The Fool, where you can also be so scared of doing anything, you're not making any moves in your life. You're sitting in one place, or you're so comfortable that it's just not good for you. Some people are in a really bad relationship and they need to move. Some people are in a really bad neighborhood and their kids are suffering through the school system or whatnot, and they really need to move, but they're just comfortable where they are. Those are a couple more examples of not moving forward, or being playful or in the moment enough, or not taking enough playful action, or worrying less and doing more. So we have, again, the balance. There's being careless, and there's being overly concerned with anxiety. You'll be anxiety ridden. Everybody needs to go play. Everybody needs to have enough play. And there's nothing wrong with, a lot of play. There is something wrong with somebody who plays all the time and isn't doing anything responsible. So, the other part of this that I've seen in a reading is that somebody's boyfriend, husband, whatnot, or even son has been careless, not given enough responsibility if it's their son, or like I say, significant other may not have been as responsible as they should be, or they're not currently thinking about the future or planning for the future like they should be, either financially, or sometimes it can mean that they are a little too flirtatious and not thinking about the long-term consequences of that. And of course, that could go for a female as well, not picking on men here. But it's a representation of anybody in this situation with any personality or any gender. So the Fool is, we call a fool. The usual connotation of a fool would be somebody who's not smart, or who needs education, or who is acting silly in some way, or not making good decisions. Yes, that applies here, but if you look at the deeper meaning of a fool as well, back in the day in the king's court, we would have, the fool entertaining the king to be funny, playful, providing some entertainment and fun, and keeping one's mind off of the worries of the world. And that basically is very therapeutic as well. If you're looking at somebody who is playful and fun, that could be a significant other too. And this is the thing I love about men, is that a lot of time they can be really playful. I think my favorite comedians are all men, and that is also a depiction of the Fool, where the male masculine energy is being playful, therapeutic in a laughing, playful, fun way. And so here we have all this broad range of different meanings with one card, and then we go into this integral definition of how we have to balance all of the seriousness with some playfulness. Nobody likes a boring person who can never have fun. And, it also gets tiring if you're around somebody too much who's not serious enough and not planning. And so, again, it's all about the balance. And if we go into just about any other, card in this arcana in the set, we can find again that there's a balance. There's a balance between our decisions and what we spend our time and energy on. So there are people who come to me for a reading, and I've noticed that sometimes they will be too focused on a relationship or not focused enough at all. This also comes up with the Fool in readings, and it very often shows up as either the person is putting way too much focus on their relationship and it's getting to the point where they're a little obsessed, or there's only so much control that they have and they need to back off. Because I've seen, too much of this attention or their worry or whatever it is, that the time that they're spending on this person is actually pushing that person away from them, because they are becoming so obsessed with thinking about the person or worrying about the person or the relationship, or are they okay, or what is the label, or it can get really overwhelming for the person and for the other people around that person. And then eventually for the person having the reading, it can be overwhelming to deal with this sort of stress. So the nice thing about readings, when we do readings, we are tapping into the electromagnetic field, the aura, and we are not only reading it, but we are moving that energy up and out by making the subconscious conscious. And what that tends to do is when we talk about how it is appearing to the person, it begins to move and their life gets better. They draw more attention to that topic. They draw more attention to what they were just denying or stuffing or like head in the sand topics, and then they start to change them consciously. And that's the beauty of these readings. So the other part of this, focusing too much on the relationship, are people who come in and they're not focusing on them at all, but they want one. And I have to just draw their attention back to their subconscious and say, well, how much are you putting into this relationship? How much effort, energy, thought, everything that goes into either finding someone or really keeping up on a relationship or marriage or whatever it is, what have you. How much energy are you putting into it? I've had people who walk in and they say, I remember one woman said, I know exactly how to get a man and keep him interested. You just reject him all the time. And she just didn't care. She didn't care about these men. She didn't care about how they felt. And she really didn't care about whether or not she got serious with them. She just said it was fun to reject them all the time. And I've never been in that situation where I don't have that personality. And I wasn't really even sure what to say. But there is that aspect. Some people put almost no emphasis on their energy going towards their relationships, those people that they love, those people that they've invested in from the beginning, either with marriage, with children, family, work, friends, what have you, coworkers. There are so many relationships that we tend to invest in, and it can be a difficult balance for some people, not so difficult for others, to really put a balance on relationships and what that means, how to put that effort in, how to acknowledge that person. So when we also go into the Fool card, we're also looking at people, usually men, because men, they have this competitive nature. They tend to kind of get the girl or get the relationship or the marriage, and then they sort of are like, well, I already got it, so now I can just relax, and then they don't put a lot of effort into it. Of course, this can go for women too. I don't want to put it all on men, but most of the time when I've done readings, just because women come to me, most of the time, probably about 90% of the time, we've seen that these men have gotten complacent with their relationships and with how much effort they're putting into their marriage, because the competitive nature is that they've already achieved that goal. And men are wired so much differently than women that, we have to go back into reminding them that, well, you got to go back in and compete again to get the same attention from the same person. So the Fool can depict so many things in so many ways, and for each person with their own unique DNA, their own unique spiritual DNA, we can see all these different meanings to the card, just like any other card, but I'm focusing on the Fool today. And we're just kind of going into, the meaning and multiple meanings of it, that there's a balance there, that, sometimes it can mean that, they're not paying enough attention, and it could be that sometimes there's too much of a focus, and more of the time, the too much of the focus can be on women. So when the men are not focusing enough, sometimes the women are also pushing them away by focusing too much and trying to nitpick every single detail. And they think that they need to do something about everything, or they need to look like this person on Facebook, or it needs to be this way or that way. And they get all of these little requirements that start coming up, and the guy just feels like he's suffocating. So then he kind of pulls away. So this can go a few different ways between the sexes. And then, of course, in a same-sex relationship, we have the male and female energies or personalities, which is very similar. And so when I say him and her, that's basically what I'm referring to as masculine and feminine. However that goes, and in some heterosexual relationships, the woman may have the more masculine features or the more masculine personality or energy, and then the male will have the more feminine. So that happens too, and those are usually the relationships that we hear people say, oh, I didn't know that the guy was with a woman, because you can kind of tell he's very feminine and he has, these certain traits. But when you pair him with the female who has a lot of masculine energy, they do very well together. It's when you have male energy and female energy that they get completely different, and then there's a whole new dynamic to deal with. So here we are with the Fool, the card. It's also the number 0, which means it's always in the background, it's always in the foreground. It doesn't have a specific number, which means that its possibilities are limitless. So that's another reason why I really love this card. It has so much flexibility and diversity, and it's a good example of when we do a reading, we're focusing on the picture, we're meditating on it, and we're seeing what comes up. There's so many different things that come up with this card. So most of the other cards, you could just have a cut and dry meaning to the card. It usually means one thing or the other, and then you focus on it a little bit just the same way, and then you have that little more clarity to it. That kind of manifests as you're looking at it. So I would just urge everybody to look at this card, to find the Fool card, to go ahead and go onto Google and look at the definition. I have a little definition that I just pulled up, and I agree with it. I think it's a pretty good depiction of the definition of the Fool card. This is on Biddy Tarot, and I really like Biddy, Biddy. It's biddytarot.com. And it gives you a generalized meaning. Now, when we see these generalized meanings of these cards, it's the general, very, very general. Every single one can always go one way or the other. Every single card, as we focus on it and as we meditate on it, it could mean something completely different. So Biddy says that it's in the major arcana, which is true, and it also depicts the Fool's journey through life and such, and he is ever present and therefore needs no number. So there we went back to the 0. So I want to see what they say about the dog. Much of the time, he's also carrying a knapsack containing everything he needs, because he's a minimalist, I guess. So there we again, there's not a lot of prep involved in the journey. It's also a journey card. It also is depicting new beginnings, opportunity, and potential. So, when we talk about maybe the meanings behind this card that need a little work, we're also talking about new opportunities, new doors opening. So the Fool is a really wonderful card to talk about new beginnings, doors opening. It's different than the Hangman, but the Hangman is kind of the same depiction of new beginnings or new journey. new potential. This one depicts more of a naive nature, young nature, inexperienced nature. Especially if somebody is in their first marriage and they're kind of being pushed into this whole definition. They're kind of like having to deal with getting this definition thrown at them. So here we have this naive young man on the edge of a cliff. So the Fool is a wonderful card. I've worked with it for so long now, and most of the other cards I just get this straight meaning to it. But the Fool I have to look at for a long time. I really have to think about it, and it really challenges me every time. It's because it has such a vast amount of meanings to it. And what's really wonderful is that it can mean so many different things. So we have like the whole deck here. I have to show you this deck. It's really, really great. This is one of the better decks that I've seen. It's Norbert Loche's Cosmic Tarot. And it's just really, really, really awesome. I love this deck. Again, this was given to me, and I kind of got a few rare decks. So I will, I think there's a couple stickers on it, but there's this here. So this is the deck, Cosmic Tarot. This is definitely one of my favorites, but the depiction here in this deck has the sun, and it also seems to have some moons below that, like the different phases of the moons up to the sun, which I really appreciate. There's also some crystals, some quartz crystal on the bottom, flowers. There's a few flowers. So in some of the Fools, he's holding a rose. This is all symbolic of different things. However, the mountains in the back, those are the things to climb in the future. The moons are all there. This is depicting, when I say I like that it has the sun and the moons in it, it's because the sun represents male or father, and the moon represents female or mother. So instead of just pointing the finger at the men all the time, it's also depicting women. And I appreciate that because, I really like to keep both genders in readings. I like to make sure that they all feel comfortable getting a reading. I don't want men to feel left out. I don't want women to feel left out. And so it's really nice to have this very gender neutral deck, which I really, really love. So, yeah, that's basically my show today. I just wanted to go over the Fool. I felt very moved to talk about it. That this whole thing with balance is very important in our lives. And I really like to think of the Fool popping up in my head when I need balance in my life. It's sort of like a good go-to symbol to think about, how can I balance this out right now? We need balance in our lives. I need balance in my life. So how do I get this balance where I'm not too stressed about it going this way, and I'm not, and I'm not so carefree that I'm ignoring my issue, and then I'm just pretending it's not there? Because I think the other way to describe carefree is being neglectful or putting your head in the sand. Ignoring things as if they're not existing is not a good way to deal with anything. We have to give it some attention, even if it's a little at a time, until we're more and more ready. And what I realize is that the more that people do that, the more that they end up being able to really start to move things for the better in their lives. The more that they visit the things that are uncomfortable, if they're being too comfortable and they're being too careless, how much control and stability they feel that they have in their lives once they start to plan a little bit more and to really focus a little more on the future and what's ahead. So I'm a big advocate in staying in the present moment, because I think that relates most to the Godhead and where they are in the time frame. Don't think time even exists to them really in the way that it does to us, that they're constantly in the present moment, because that's all that is really there at this time. That here on this planet, we have the past, present, and future, which is all really just one time continuum. And so when I think about time, and this is how we can tell things from the past to the future, we can see it as readers. It's very easy to see it because it's all happening really at once, which is hard for a lot of people to understand. But to really be connected to the divine and to spirit and our own lives. I really feel like we need to not be worrying about the past or thinking about the future too much. Just living fully in the present moment, which also is based on the past and past results, and really preparing for the future, but staying in the present moment so we're not too detached from those around us that we love. And I think the Fool's a good way to keep remembering that. Like the card, it's the card of balance and of really keeping things on a balanced scale. So that's my time for tonight. If you have any questions, you can contact me, Anna Olsen, Intuitive. It's at the bottom of the screen. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week.